Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Visiting Writers Series. This series is sponsored by the Colorado College English Department with the support of the McLean Visiting Writers Endowment. We are coming to you from Colorado College, which is located in Colorado Springs, Colorado, within the unceded territory of the Ute people. The earliest documented peoples also include the Apache, Arapaho, Comanche, and Cheyenne. An extended list of tribes with a legacy of occupation in Colorado can be found on the Indigenous Community at CC webpage. Thank you all again for joining us tonight. I'm Steve Hayward. I'm chair of the English department. And as you all know, it's the presentation of the James Yaffe Adelaide Bender Revell Prize for Fiction. I should take the opportunity to say that you can see all of our upcoming Visiting Writers events on the English department webpage, or you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for dates and reader info. All of the English department events are free and open to the public, although Zoom registration, pre-registration is required and recommended. So thank you again for being here. Before we get started, I want to give a particular shout out and a strong hello to the Revell family who donated the funds for that make this prize and make all of our creative writing prizes possible. Now, you may not know this, but Paul Revell, now Professor Revell at Harvard, is in fact the first person to have ever published anything about the educational experiment that would become the block plan long ago in the spring of 1968. This was something that Professor Revell wasn't exactly aware of, but that was uncovered during the making of the Block Plan 50th Anniversary podcast. If you'd like more on that and more about Paul Revell's writing and about the Block Plan, and to hear his voice, you can find that in the Block Plan podcast, which is in the 50th Anniversary Block Plan page. Now it's my great pleasure and honor to introduce our reader tonight and our judge of our fiction contest, Sammi LaBue. In addition to being a student, an alum of the creative writing fiction track, English major at Colorado College, she was in fact a student in the very first class that I taught at Colorado College. And so it's particularly exciting for us to welcome her back to the Visiting Writers Series. She was also a student who came on the very first trip abroad that I ever led, which was to Canada, and we had a wonderful time there. We had a lot of adventures, which she may or may not tell you about, as a student at CC. She's the author of the Creative Writers Guided Journal, Words in Progress, and the founder of the Fledgling Writers Workshop, which hosts generative courses online and in person. You can find her work in Literary Hub, Pank, Glamour, Hobart, The Feminist Wire, and elsewhere. After graduating from CC, she earned her MFA from Vermont College of Fine Arts and is currently at work on a memoir with her mother. Without further ado, Sammi LaBue.
Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you for having me. This is really surreal to be here, and to be here on this side of the desk, even though we're on this side of the screen. Even though it's been 9 years since I graduated, I still feel like I should be a student sometimes when I come back to campus. And so thank you for welcoming me home in a way, even though here we are on a screen, which is also pretty strange because when I started at CC, Skype was just becoming a thing and it felt like we were in the future. I'm so thrilled to have had the opportunity to read and judge all of the incredible work that was submitted to this year's, let's see if I can get it all out, the Adelaide Bender Revell James Yaffe Prize for Short Fiction. It's kind of a mouthful, but I kind of feel like I've been holding on to this secret of which stories really stood out to me. So I'm not going to make you wait too much longer. And I want to tell you who the winners are. I was just so blown away by how much variety there was in these pieces, and how unique and sort of inspired in personal ways all of these different stories were. It made it really hard to judge, because I happen to think that what we look for in story is to hear something that we truly understand, or maybe even have like lived or heard before, but told to us in a completely unique way that could only come from one unique perspective. And all of the pieces were just so different from each other and felt very honest. So it was very hard to choose. And for that reason, along with the 3 prize winners, I also just want to list a few honorable mentions before I get into the main prize winners, because I just can't go on without talking about them. So first on my list of honorable mentions, I have 3, is Confessions of a 21-Year-Old Lit Virgin by Olivia Belloc. This was a story about a girl who has never been kissed, struggling to enjoy her 21st birthday at a club. And I just felt that this story like really effortlessly moved from scene to backstory to description. It had that balance that a narrative needs. But I also just loved the voice and interiority of this narrator. I found it very relatable and at times very funny, but also could, be very deep too. So shout out to Olivia Belloc. Also an honorable mention, Echo by Tia Vierling. This was a really interestingly written piece. It was written in vignettes and was about a complicated relationship between 2 women who start as friends when they're children, and this relationship grows into love and marriage over time. But the main character wonders if she's really been herself all along. I thought it was really brave and hard content to try to tackle in a short story form, and it really paid off in the nuance of the details. So again, Echo. Amazing. And then for my last honorable mention, I chose The Space by Noam Tab. This was also about a complicated relationship between 2 women, but these were sisters who had just lost their mother, but there was a strain between them. I found this one just really sure of itself right out of the gate. That's also something that I'm always looking for, is to sort of like be taken care of by the author from the first sentence, and know that, we're going to be going on a journey together. But I really felt like I was there, and it never went too maudlin, even for this dark subject matter. So just really incredible work. All right, I won't make you wait any longer than that for the 3 prize winners. All of these prize winners could not be more different than each other, and I'm glad that I got to choose 3 for that reason. The first one, the 3rd prize, goes to a story in which one family goes through an unexpected COVID crisis. And I was just really blown away by this one, because I think it can often be really difficult to write about something that has happened recently. I think that we often need a little bit more space from hard subjects, even when we're writing fiction, for it to not be too contrived. But this story was none of those things. And I really appreciated how COVID sort of came out and surprised me, almost like it did in real life. And I really got to know this family unit. And so for those reasons, Our Little Green Field by Finn Bingham is the 3rd prize winner. So congratulations to Finn. And then in 2nd prize, like I said, very different from the 3rd. This one was about a young man and his friend who tried to bust a Xanax dealer at their school. While in many respects, this piece was sort of an absurd comedy, similar to Tropic Thunder or Pineapple Express in the way that it was written, I felt it was also very deep and an important, honest look at the problem and epidemic of Xanax use in America, and also a really poignant look at the transition between boyhood and manhood. And, you know, it was just so complex in that way and layered and thoughtful that I had to give it recognition. So for that reason, Suburban Thunder by Willem Patrick is my second prize choice. So we're on to our first prize winner. And this one really just stood out to me from the very first line. I was sort of smitten. It's actually a fable about how man has been ruined by want and turned against nature. And some of the biggest players in this piece were not actually human characters, but flora and fauna. I just felt that it could be sent to one of my favorite literary journals right now, the Fairy Tale Review. I loved the angle of environmental writing and the assuredness of that authorial voice, and especially just the fearlessness of the imagination that was involved. And so, for that reason, The Vultures and the Sycamore by Daniel Archibald is the first prize winner of this year's, can I say it again? Adelaide Benter Revel James Yaffe Prize for Short Fiction. So congratulations to Daniel.
Woo, woo. Daniel is actually here with us.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Let's see if if you'd like to just say hello here. Here's Daniel. Let's see if this will work here. Hey, Daniel.
Daniel, you're getting called out.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes, I loved your piece so much, and I was just so surprised by your bravery just to go there with the subject matter.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. It was really fun to write. And I'm actually, as we speak, I'm multitasking and I'm working on building some puppets, and I'm going to do a live presentation of a similar story. So there's a vulture and an old man in my presence right now.
Oh, great. I had no idea there were puppets involved.
Well, thanks. Thanks for letting us put you on the spot there, Daniel.
Of course.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you both so much.
Yeah, and we'll see you at Honors Convocation. We'll be presenting the award, okay?
Thank you.
Yeah, fantastic.
All right, so Sammi, would you like to tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing now in your recent book, Words in Progress?
Yes, I'd love to. I just want to say that everyone who turned in work should be so proud of themselves. Like one of the biggest roadblocks that I see in different students that I work with now through my small business fledgling writing workshops, I've written with like over 500 different writers in Brooklyn and beyond. And what people always complain about is not being able to finish work. And so just the fact that you got it done and you submitted it is really like enough to celebrate. It may not feel like it now, but because you have the support of CC, but the world will try to steal away your attention from your art. And so you have to find that time to nurture and practice and to write. And that is what kind of led me on my career path. And I'm excited to be here to talk about this book, Words in Progress, that I came out with in September of last year. It is a book of lessons and prompts. I am very into prompts for the reason that they have helped me keep up my writing practice since graduating from CC. But this book really is like a manifestation of all the things that I've learned after graduating about how to, keep up this writing life, because it's a little bit harder than you would think. Now, I kind of have to talk about my career journey to talk about how the book came to be, because I was actually approached because of my business by DK, which is a Penguin Random House imprint, to write this book because they were looking for an expert on prompts. But so right after CC, I moved to New York, and I kind of had like all the writer jobs you could have. I worked at Penguin for a little while as a publicist. I tried copywriting, I tried ghostwriting, I freelanced in different ways. I worked at a magazine, but what I really wanted to do was write. And so in the meantime, I was taking all these workshops, and I got my MFA where I did more workshops, and I started to kind of realize that my my writing was actually suffering rather than getting better, being in this like competitive atmosphere all the time, or everybody trying to figure out, you know, what was wrong with your piece rather than helping you generate your piece. And then I started to volunteer for the New York Writers Coalition, who works with different communities in New York who are underserved. And they used this process of using prompts. And I started to realize that I really had a knack for it. And that's what I did at Colorado College when I had to, you know, like write 3 stories in one block. It can be really hard to come up with all of those ideas. But I would use like old images or song lyrics or like stuff I found at Goodwill to kind of like spark an idea in me. And I realized that I had been kind of creating prompts all along. And it just resonated with me that, hey, maybe not everybody does that, and they could use some help. So really I made something that I really needed by starting fledgling writing workshops. You know, I think that's good advice for anyone at any point in their career, is to, you know, when in doubt, make something that you need. Kind of like Toni Morrison said, you know, if there's a book that you want to read that's not out there, then you have to write it. And that's what I did with fledgling writing workshops. And it turned out that a lot of people needed help just generating stories, and not only getting a prompt that might be, you know, on Reddit or something that is a little bit too narrow. Sometimes I think that the prompts that you might find online are so specific that they actually like shut down your imagination rather than opening it up. They'll be like, you're the last man on earth, and all you have is a box of Cheez-Its. Like, that's the story premise. But I think that's what sets the prompts in Words in Progress apart from other prompts you might find, is that they're really meant to just stir up your own imagination and memories. And you will come up with something totally unique to what somebody else might write to the prompts in this book. And also there are 7 different sections. And so that's not just for generating, you know, the beginning of a piece, but to take you from the beginning to the details, to the conflict, to character, and all the way to the end. There's actually a whole section on finding the end, because like I said, I think that's really important. So basically this book is just full of secrets that have helped me to write novels and essays and stories and poems. And it's sort of like my bag of tricks. And so, you know, if you're staring down another block of having to come up with lots of new work, then, you know, consider prompts, making your own prompts, or maybe reaching for Words in Progress and trying it yourself. Yeah, so that's basically how this book came to be.
Well, thank you, Sammy. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit, you know, about that earlier part, the journey that you had, like to the point at which you become someone who is running this. You know, like I remember when you started the business in Brooklyn, and you're like, you know, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this sort of this business, and that to see it bloom, and even to the extent to now, it's so big that you're actually employing CC alums, right? Like people who have graduated from our program who are like doing their different thing. Can you talk a little bit about like what part of this work that you're doing now really answers a kind of a need for you that the other parts of publishing maybe weren't?
Again, I just feel like to be a writer, you have to write. And all those other jobs I had, I was always looking for something where there was like a lot of writing involved. But even those literary jobs don't necessarily always have a lot of writing involved or in the way that you want it to be. And I wanted to create community. And so I thought, okay, maybe being a teacher, like a workshop teacher, would work for me. So I actually worked for a lot of different of the other workshops in the city, and volunteered and just tried to kind of get my foot in the door. But I realized that wasn't really, it was a really hard market to get into. And meanwhile, when I would be like at parties and just meeting people, I would say I'm a writer, and just lots of everyday people would say, oh, I used to write, or I love to write, or I wish I could write. I wish I knew what to write about. And I realized that there was like a little bit of there was a little hole there for this demographic, that I like a niche that I could fill. That was for people who just want to write stories and don't necessarily want to, be in this really academic, atmosphere. But yeah, it was a little bit dramatic, I think, to make that big leap, because I bartended while I was starting the business, because I just recognized that, working as a publicist was not working for me, even if it was at a publishing house. I just had to, like Annie Dillard says, how you spend your days is how you spend your life. And I realized that I was spending my days filling out Excel spreadsheets, which is fine, but I wanted to spend my life as a writer. So I just had to get out of there and apply for my MFA and start this business.
It's such a great such a great trajectory. Now, one of the things about writing prompts is that, like, amongst people who teach creative writing, there is a kind of like, there is a, like everyone's people really interested in it because people say like, oh well, what kind of prompt do you because you're immediately thinking it's one of the times like what constitutes a good prompt. So if you are like you are like, let's say that you are doing this one, you have the one chance you're gonna do this. Like if I put you on the spot right now and say, tell me like what's your go-to writing prompt that is the sort of that you really maybe particularly love or that you've had particular success with?
Yeah, I guess my favorite prompt changes all the time. But I've really been loving like color prompts. When we used to be able to meet in person, I would like hand out color swatches, just like paint swatches, and ask people to try to use all of the silly names of the colors in their piece and really try to infuse a piece with that color. And I think that always comes up with really cool things. But also, like I said, just like honestly, like looking up a random image on Flickr is something I used to do and I still do now. Just images, like really get it going. Especially right now in the world, we're not walking around, we're not going on vacation, you can't wait for inspiration to strike you like lightning. Sometimes you have to put your butt in the seat and figure out how to bring that inspiration to you. And so, yeah, images, but also Post Secret is something that I have used for years and years, which is a website where people send in their secrets on postcards. And they make incredible prompts because, as I'm sure secrets cause a lot of conflict in life and in fiction. So ever since I was, I don't know, maybe 13, I've been stealing people's secrets from Post Secret to start stories. I think one of the first stories I wrote for your class was based on a Post Secret about a man who thought he would like his wife better dead, is what it said. And I really freaked everybody out with that story, but I think they liked it.
I remember it. I wonder if you could say a little bit about, now you work on this memoir with your mother, Linda, who I've met because she used to work at CC, and so I got to know her a little. What is that like? Is that, it's both working with a family member. I suppose I imagine that there's a sort of a comfort there. Then there's also like, is there ground? Is there a kind of a delicacy there around finding out things that are sometimes complicated?
Yes. Oh, I'm learning a lot about my family. I feel worried to say too much about it, and I'm usually not that way. So there's one thing about having like a collaborator, because I know she's a bit more shy about it than I am. But I wrote an essay about intergenerational trauma for Literary Hub, and it got a lot of traction and interest. And I just realized that, this could be something bigger. And I've always thought that my mom's story was one that people should hear. I have never really collaborated on a piece before, except for one time with my 16-year-old mentee. And that was a little bit more fun. It wasn't about intergenerational trauma. But somehow, so far, my mom and I have been doing really well. Sometimes we do interviews and I record it and I listen back to it and I use that as sort of a prompt. Sometimes I give her a prompt and ask her to write about this moment or a favorite meal or something like that. And then she'll send it to me and I sort of like look at it on one screen and type it up in whatever way comes to me. But it's been incredible. And for someone who usually writes fiction where, you've got to come up with the whole story, it's actually been really freeing to that the story is already there. And I get to just sort of do the fun part of like making it beautiful and bringing in the themes. But life is funny. The themes are always already there, kind of. She talks about these things, and it's all there for you. So it's been really great.
One of the reasons that we're particularly, it's great. First of all, thank you for doing it. It's great to see you, and it really is it really is true that you were in the first class that I taught at CC, and this is like, this is, I guess, something like 12 years ago or something. So it's one, it's great to see you. And one of the reasons why we were excited to have you as a judge and to have this exchange with you is because we have in the audience now, you should know, most of the senior fiction workshop who we're working with right now. And you know what that feels like to be on the precipice of just about to hand in at the end of block 7, your senior thesis, and then what? And one of the we often would have alums come in, and some of the feedback we got back from our students was, it's good that you're having these alums, but we need to have alums who are sort of who we can who are a little bit more like connected to our age, rather, instead of being like 30, they graduated 30 to 40 years ago. Let's have somebody who graduated maybe like 5 years ago or 10 years ago or something like that. And I wonder, like, one of the things that I do when I that myself and Professor Pulley do, mostly it's me, is that I often tease the seniors by saying, so what are we doing when we graduate? And there's some students who are like, they know they have the whole plan. There's other students who really are really sort of don't want to sort of are reluctant to have that conversation. I understand both sides of that. Do you have advice, like if you could take yourself back to Sammi LaBue in the spring of something like 2012 or
2012.
2012, 2013, what advice do you have for that previous version of yourself who's just about to graduate from Colorado College?
Oh my gosh. Wow, I was freaking out. I think, you know what? I think my advice to myself would be that like the major you choose is really not that important. And I hate to say it like that. Like, I'm glad that I chose the track that I did, but I got all in my head like, I'm a creative writing major with a religion minor. Like, why did I do that? You know, I should have been I should have been a doctor. What am I going to do with that? But you know, Colorado College really does just prepare you for life, no matter what. We do way more writing in general than I think like the general public does, and that is very important. Every time I meet a CC person, I hired a CC person, but I just kind of know that I can trust them. You know, if we're going to be stuck on a desert island for some reason, like, it's going to be all right. Like, you've got everything you need to get out in the world and get yourself a job. I went to the Denver Publishing Institute right from Colorado College at DU, which is like a month-long publishing. If you're interested in publishing, I think it's a really good idea. It was actually really interesting just to like see that side of things as a writer too. But it was actually in one of those classes. I was sitting in the back of the lecture hall, and one of the agents up there was saying, you know, you can't be in publishing unless you live in New York. And I bought myself a one-way ticket to New York at that moment, and I just went. And you know, I'm sitting in my home in Brooklyn right now, and so I don't know. I just don't think that it's so necessary to figure out what you're going to do for the rest of your life right away. Like, right now is a good time to take chances. Like, you're not held back by a family. Families are nice too, but but it's all up to you. So, you know, have adventures and be bold and just kind of like see where it takes you, because you're going to be okay.
So we have a question in the, and please, we welcome any kind of questions that anyone might have. From an anonymous attendee asks, what was your thesis about and how do you feel about it now? Did anything come of it?
My thesis was called When the Moment's the Trigger, and it was a novella about a boy who is shot with a blank during a school shooting, and he believes that he's dead. And then it goes between him as a child and him as a adult, still sort of obsessed with death, and he works as a mortuary makeup artist. And I still love my novella. I sent it to a couple of contests, but you know, it didn't get any traction, but I did use it. I sort of like pared it down to a longer short story that got me into my MFA program. So that was my sample that I used for the MFA. And honestly, I think about that story still, and you know, I might dust it off and bring it back and work on it a little bit. I felt very close to it, and it taught me, you know, how to sustain a longer piece, and you know, sort of like a training wheels book in a beautiful way. Everybody needs to start somewhere, and everyone has a couple of books in the drawer that, you know, they might be in the drawer, but that doesn't mean that every step doesn't get you to write the next better thing. Yeah. So I feel good about it.
Yeah, I know. I remember it, you know, and it's, you know, I remember, you know, it's sort of a hard form to place, right? The novella, because it's longer. So like places that are publishing sort of, But I think thanks for remember. I'm pleased to be reminded of the Denver Publishing Institute, because that really is it's still like one of the things that our graduates think about. And the other thing that people think about and they ask, we get a lot of questions about, is the MFA. And thinking about it from what you're doing now, looking back on the MFA, you did a low residency MFA, if I'm remembering. What is your thoughts about that degree? Is that a thing that you would do again? Was that a useful part of your process?
I dedefinitely would do it again. MFAs are expensive. I think we had Aubrey Hirsch, who is an awesome writer, and now she's a cartoonist. But she sort of talked to me during the thesis about MFAs. First of all, I would wait. Don't go get your MFA right away. I think there's something really to be said about like just checking out the world and just paying your bills and doing life before you go get the MFA. But I thought that it was really useful just in making me more confident in saying I am a writer. And I really liked the low residency program because I was able to keep my job. So I was bartending, starting fledgling, and doing my MFA at the same time. And maybe that seems sort of weird, but for the arts, I think it makes a lot of sense because I learned how to practice, to build my practice on my own, which is the way that it's always going to be. So I got to, kind of like get my hand held while I was building these habits that I still have kept up. And now I continue to write. And I just wrote a lot. I wrote tons of short stories. I wrote a novel. I started another one. And nobody's ever going to care about your work like they do in an MFA. even after it's published and it's a huge hit, people really aren't going to discuss with you and care about your characters so deeply like they do in an MFA. So I do think it's cool, but try to get that funding, and low residency is cheaper because you're not there all the time. So like Aubrey said to me, you're not going to be a doctor at the end of the day. You're still going to be a writer or a poet. And so, the dividends are going to maybe take a little while to come back to you.
It's great I forgot that you intersected with Aubrey, who was, at the time we had the Daily Fellowship, now it's a sort of a block visitor. That was a full year visitor where we had sort of a post grad person who came in and worked, with our fiction students. We're still actually working with Aubrey, and she's collaborating with myself and about 6 students on a project about visual narratives and the financial aid process. Wow. She transitioned into being a cartoonist, as you know, where she does these cartoons for Vox. I mean, they're hugely popular, and they get so much play. So that's I'm in contact with her. I will tell her hello from you. But it's interesting to think. So you graduated about 10 years ago, and or so. If you were to look into the future 10 years from now, and sort of imagine yourself, Sammi LaBue, instead of being, being 30s in the 40s, so what 10 years from now, Sammi, what do you imagine? Where do you where would you like to be? What is your thoughts about that? In other words, to put you in the same position as we are to our, to say what do you, not the graduation class, but what would you hope or think or want to be?
It's funny to think about my hopes for where I might be after just answering these questions about where I am and where I thought I would be then, because I was so wrong, I had no idea. I never thought that I would own a business. I just, at first, honestly, just thought, I just really want to teach, and I'll make a little money from this. And then people kept coming and coming, and I just said yes and yes, and it grew and grew. but I hope to still be teaching with fledgling. I would like to work at, maybe a university level too. I think working at a low residency would be really nice, because you get to go there, a couple times a year. And it's just, working for an MFA program, I think would be really special, to be that person who cares so much about somebody else's work. But also, this was my first published book, but it doesn't look like I thought it was going to look. I thought it would be in the fiction section. So I don't know. I'm hoping that at that point, I'll have books in different parts of Barnes and Noble, not just that one.
So we have a question, maybe one last question before we let you go. What are your favorite literary journals and reviews? What is your process for discovering places you would like to be published? And this is one of the things that one of the questions that comes up a lot. Now you've got, maybe you're graduating from CC, you've got like a set of stories, maybe you've got a longer manuscript. How would you approach that question of, transitioning from, you've been doing the work and workshop at Colorado College and now you take it out in the world?
Right. I think it's really important to, I hate how they're always like read the journal. And so I guess you have to read, like so many pages to figure out where you belong. But it is good to like look around, look at their mission statement. I think that I made some mistakes in the beginning by just sending things to places because they were like really like top notch. But now I'm more interested, honestly, in being published in a place where I know that it's going to reach the reader that I'm looking for. I really like So to Speak Journal. That's a feminist journal. I love Crazy Horse. I think they do interesting things. Hobart, I have published a few poems in, which I love because I would read it a lot. And so, if you genuinely like what they're doing, then it's going to be a better place for you to go. But I am sort of a lurker on Twitter. I'm a really bad tweeter, but it's a great literary place. And I love that because I'm a bad tweeter, I only really have like followed literary organizations. And so that's how I kind of like stay in the know, I would say, is like cruising Twitter every once in a while for new stories coming out and what I'm interested in. And then I'll click on it from there.
All right. Well, thank you for that. And thank you for judging our contest. It's great to have you here and to talk about the work that you're doing. Congratulations again to everyone who submitted and all of our winners. And thank you, Erica, once again for making the Zoom possible. And Sammi, we'll have to have you back again in another 10 years. Or no, I'm kidding. But we'll welcome. It's great to have you back home as you were like. And I wish that we could be doing this in person, but we'll hope that in whatever sometime in the future that we'll be able to not just gather in person, but to gather to celebrate your next, whether it's a memoir, whether it's a novel. We'll just wait to see.
Yes, that sounds great. It's been so nice to be here with my favorite CC professor, but also my other favorite CC professor I see is one of the participants here, Jenny Love. And I also had just incredible experiences in her classes. So you're all very lucky to be working with these people, and good luck in what comes next. And like I said, be bold.
Well, thank you, Sammi, and thank you all for attending, and we will see you next time. Ciao.